All right, we're in the second half. And I just wanted to kind of go over briefly the concept of the pre-shadow, retrograde, direct shadow position. Because Eric made a good point. Because we were putting the declinations up on the board and then we were talking about speeds, somehow speed may have gotten confused with other things. When we're talking about the pre-shadow, the post-shadow, we're not talking about speed. We're talking about resistance, is what we're talking about. In other words, the planet, whatever planet is moving in a forward direction in the ephemeris. It still keeps going until the very, very day it goes retrograde. But the point at which it starts to resist a little bit, slow down, you know, just like the oil's running out of the engine, is when the planet will reach the degree and the sign of that degree and minute at which it eventually, after goes backwards and goes direct. Okay, so it's actually a little longer cycle, all right? But these are points of resistance. Those are, or the release. This direct point is a release point. This is a resistance point. This is a resistance point. And this is getting back on track on the shadow position. Okay? Now, obviously, you know this better than I. It's not just one factor, though. I mean, if you have this purely by itself, and nothing is pure, then we can say, okay, this is happening, this is happening. If you have a hard bunch of aspects hitting, those hard line ones that we're talking about, it may not be as flowing as we would like it to be, but it does still assist it. It does still help it or resists it, okay? Is that a little clear? We're not talking about speed here. We're talking about resistance, okay? All right, good. Now, erase the board, okay. Now, what I thought we would do, gee, it seems like sort of a letdown, actually, unless you folks don't want to do it, but I think we should. I'd like to talk about the planets, if we might. May we do that? Okay. I think it's a good idea. I did go the way I went in because the reason I did that is because I like to teach from the foundation up. If you start bringing in, I found this with my students at Kepler, because some of them know a lot and some of them don't know, well, they know a lot now, but they didn't know when they started. And they start getting really confused with, you know, the sun, the Mercury, the Mars, you know, the directs. And so that's why we started with those basic cycle structures, because really what this is about is the cycles. And actually, I do work with the signs, I do. But really, I work with the planets. And that's because each planet has its own type of energy. And what I've done is in your little packet there, you'll have this sheet here, which we're going to put up on the board here, which is also from a website, northnode.com. It's at the top. I just needed a really good drawing of the glyphs, and they had the best, and so I'm using their stuff, and they have some really great things at their website. Okay, now, I gave you a copy of the astrological glyphs because you all know, are you all familiar with the glyphs pretty much? No, okay. Okay, if you don't mind, I'm going to try and teach you a really fast, like primary way of learning these. And that's why I would suggest the Business Astrology 101 book, because I'm a very right-brained teacher, and in there, if you read about the planets, you'll remember what they look like. And I have to tell you, if you're working with this stuff, and this is the most boring part of it, is you really have to learn the glyphs, even if you have to make your own flashcards. Because if you don't know the language, you can't translate it, okay? So what I did do, though, is I went through and I gave you a list of what each, there's thousands of things that the planets mean, all right? I was trying to stay more in your area of expertise. And I also put the planetary cycles. And the one thing to always remember in terms of cycles, the slow planets in the end always win, okay? And in other words, they always win. And that's the reason when we first started out, I gave you the graph of Saturn, and then I talked about the outer planets. All right. Saturn has a cycle of, what does your sheet of paper say in your little graph thing here in the chartreuse? A cycle of 29.5 years, right? Saturn, by the way, looks like Captain Hook. It literally looks like a hook that's going to grab you and hold you. And he was in mythology Kronos, the god of time. He's the timekeeper. I always look at this as the time card thing, the T up here. And It's very good for measurements. So if you have a bunch of really, Mercury and Mars flying through the sky, but you have Saturn at one of those hard angles to Neptune, for example, for a long time, a year or so, those are going to, in the end, have more of an influence than sometimes your smaller ones. If you're doing intraday trading, I think it's your Mercuries, it's your moons, but always be aware of the slower planets winning, okay? Now, that's different than the moon, which is how many days?
27, 29.
Yeah, let's say actually, it says 28 and a half here. It should be about 29 and a half days. Now, isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting that Saturn, that looks like Captain Hook, that's a timekeeper, and the moon both have a 29 and a half cycle? It's interesting, isn't it? And if you think in terms of, I know I'm reiterating, but I'm just trying to bring this home to you. If you think in terms of our original eightfold cycle, this was originally the moon cycle, right? But that's also the cycle for any planet, Saturn included, okay, or the moon. But especially Saturn and moon, there is a relationship between those two. And actually, if you ever get into the more technical, if you get into more technical work with astrology, for example, if you have a chart of a company, and I work with companies, individual companies, or a human, for that matter, or an event, the moon and Saturn, from the moment of that entity beginning, will always follow each other over. In other words, it takes moon 29 and a half years to progress through the horoscope, the same as Saturn takes 29 and a half years to go around the horoscope. So there is a correlation between these two. That's why I think if you want to try something as an experiment, this is just an idea, is because we were talking a little earlier about the moon and the aspects during the day, you may want to try all the aspects that the moon does to Saturn during the course of a day to see if you're doing intraday trading, in that hour, is it up, is it down, is it a positive distance, a discordant distance, or during the week, what the relationship is, and see if your cycles are going up and down, because they do follow each other through the wheel of a horoscope, okay? Now, let's just look at the planets. And if you look at an ephemeris, which I'm sure you all know how to read an ephemeris. I mean, you all know, we were looking at that a moment ago, right? Ephemerises are somewhat familiar. Okay, if you look, here we have the glyphs, the shorthand. I call this the astrological shorthand of the planets. Don't pay attention to this down here. Just pay attention to the top two rows. We start with the sun on the left, your left, and we go Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. Chiron's in here. I'm not going to cover that today, but that's in here because it is between these two planets in the sky. And actually, I found this has a lot to do with hybrid industries, like the hybrid car, etc. Neptune, Pluto, those are the two symbols, and of course that's the retrograde symbol. If you look at your ephemeris, they do the same thing. They really have the faster ones in the beginning and the slowest ones at the end, all right? Except that really it should be the moon's first because it moves a lot faster, but for some reason they always list the sun first. And you can remember the sun because the sun is just like it looks in the solar system. That's how to remember it. It's the center of the universe. It's the sun. That's how to remember the sun. And where the sun is moving, the sun moves literally, it's very predictable. It's very constant. It only moves a little or a little bit more or a little less than 1 degree a day, depending on the time of year. The sun moves far more quickly in winter. In other words, when the sun is in Capricorn, you have a quicker sun, okay? When the sun is in solstice, which is Cancer, you have the really long days and a longer ascension is what they call it. And actually, if you ever work with, again, company charts, and you do what they call the progressions for company charts, if, for example, a planet in a company chart is moved into Cancer, it's going to have a much longer stay there than it will in Capricorn because it's a long ascension. It's slow. I mean, anybody who has Cancer rising, it takes forever to move to Leo rising. It just takes forever. If you have Capricorn rising instantly in your lifetime, you get to Aquarius, which is kind of good because in the northern hemisphere, you freeze to death when the sun is in Capricorn. It's a joke. Anyway, yeah, you guys, come on. Should I do my George Carlin joke?
Yeah.
I will by the end of the afternoon. I will do the George Carlin joke by the end of the afternoon. The right moment has to appear. Okay, So where the sun is moving through the sky is literally where things are getting lit up. That's how you look at the sun. In fact, the way I always explain it to people is the sun is kind of like the vitamin C in the chart, okay? If you need some energy or you don't have any vitality, go to where that is in the chart. Go to where that is in the sky. It will help. It will boost. People will speculate more when the sun is at a certain position because the sun rules speculation, risk-taking. It rules the fifth house. The moon, we all recognize the moon. We've been working with it all day long, right? But the interesting thing about the moon, and this is again reiterating, is it changes shapes. So it's not constant. The sun is constant and the moon is not constant. That's why for timing, sometimes the moon is better, all right? Now, Mercury, we briefly explained it before. Mercury is fast, right? Mercury takes about 80-some days, about a quarter of a year, to move through the sky in a full orbit. And if you want to remember Mercury, I always think of this, as I said, the FTD floral person with the winged hat and the wings on the feet. And it moves quickly. And it doesn't, you know, it's very interesting. The moon is an interesting character because the moon doesn't have a light of its own. The moon reflects the sun's light. So the moon is sort of spongy, so who it hangs around, it feels more like that. If the moon is hanging around what we call malefic energy, which I hate that word, but you know, it sounds so dark and medieval, like this place, this castle. It's very weird when you walk into this place with that big thing in the doorway and those things in front of it. Oh, wow. Anyway, not to go too far off center here, it was very strange, that thing in the door was purple. But the moon does reflect. I mean, if the moon is hanging around, the positive, you know, Venus she's very aggressive, but she's positive. She may take on more energy. The moon around the sun takes on more energy. Moon around Saturn, cold. Saturn rules the cold, wet, damp mop, the concrete, the rocks. It's stiff. It's not bad. I mean, it's pruning your trees, and that's why I think every time we have Saturn, like we have it coming up into the sign of Cancer, which rules like the housing industry, the houses, moon rules Cancer, homes, containers of people, restaurants, food business. Jupiter was in Cancer, food went high. I think food inflated a lot this last year. We were giving it away like we had so much to give away, and there's plenty of it, you know. Now Saturn's going to go into Cancer. That means that the food industry is going to have some issues, like the whole issue with McDonald's right now. Not McDonald's, you know, the whole thing about, they're discovering about the fast foods that they have this thing in there that gives people fat. Well, you know, I think that that's a great market for fast food places because we're Americans that will supply healthy fast food. That's going to be a good market because when Saturn goes into Cancer, the people that are involved in that industry that are not doing the new things suffer, okay? Like housing prices will probably go flat. They won't be escalating, or there'll be a lot of opportunities to build low-cost housing. I mean, that's how you look at these markets. Saturn usually means either there's not enough of something, so the price goes up, all right? Or there's some trouble in River City, and we've got to correct it, okay? When Jupiter is there, sometimes people overpay. Like Jupiter's in Leo right now, in the Western system. I mean, we could have the argument for the Vedic system, but we're not going to go there, although I think the Vedic system is a good system. Jupiter in Leo, you know, a lot of people are spending a lot of money right now. There's a really high debt ratio, thinking, oh, it's going to be okay. Well, you know, once Jupiter goes into Virgo, which is at the end of August, Virgo is Earth. It's practical. It's detailed. It assimilates what it needs. It gets rid of what it doesn't need, all right? So you have to watch when these energies go into these different sectors because it will affect the different sectors. Venus. Now, Venus is an important planet, not given much credence by a lot of, I mean, in traditional astrology, she's beautiful, she's pleasant, she has to do with relationships. That's the cookbook version of Venus. But Venus is actually, and she looks like a mirror, literally like a mirror, where you're holding a mirror, where you're looking at yourself. And Venus has to do with values of self and values in general. Okay, so for example, in your own individual horoscope, wherever Venus might be, that's what you value. Therefore, you'll spend more time with that. Other people may, like if you have Venus, for example, in Sagittarius, you may like to travel. Venus in Aquarius, you may love computers and gadgets, you know. Venus, however, is an interesting planet because she can be a morning star or an evening star. And when she leads the sun, when she's rising before the sun, that's called Venus Lucifer, leading the sun. When first the sun comes up and then Venus is coming above the horizon, she's a day star, that's called Venus Hesperus. Now, one of the mythologies about Venus is that she's nice, she's bonbon, she's the couch, she's chocolates, she's the Marilyn Monroe archetype, which she is. But she also her whole purpose is to get what she wants. And she is probably one of the more aggressive of the planets. And in fact, when she's leading the sun, when she's doing Venus Lucifer, she's extremely aggressive, and she will actually step over dead bodies to get what she wants. I mean, that's what I always tell people. Venus is and she's very prominent, I think, in the wheat. Don't they use that in the wheat commodities, Venus?
Copper.
And copper, yeah, because Venus rules Taurus, and that's copper. And I think that they sometimes use it for wheat.
Currencies too.
Oh, yeah, thank you about that. Thank you very much about that, the currencies. Taurus, money, Venus rules Taurus and monies. Now, can I say something more about that, about currencies? Because I was going to bring that up, but I don't want to get too off track. No, I know what we'll do. I'll make a note. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. When I get to that, I'll get to that. All right, so that's how Venus looks. She looks like a mirror. She has to do with values. She has to do with pleasant contractual agreements when things are going well. Venus, if it's in your chart, it's moving in a favorable way, it could be a great time to do some investing. Just don't overspend. Okay, now Mars is a different horse of a different color. Mars actually is the red planet, literally. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember Ben Casey. Did they have Ben Casey out here? And did anybody see Ben Casey? Remember that? Remember how Ben Casey, Vince, what was his name? Vince somebody. He would go man, woman, birth, I think it was death and infinity. Remember that? Remember that? I mean, that's actually, I think, when I started learning astrology, when I saw those two things. Oh, what's that about, you know? So Mars is what I call the trigger in the gun. Mars is, and Mars rules Aries, but actually in classic astrology, you can also use it for Scorpio. And I think if you're using timing and timing of events, you should use it for both those signs. Because if you use Pluto for Scorpio, you'll never get anything moving, all right? But Mars, every 6 weeks to 7 weeks, it's moving along. And Mars is about taking action. It's about strategizing. Think of the gladiator with the sword, okay? The gladiator with the sword. That's what this looks like, Mars. Now, and it's interesting because if you look at the early Greek myths and then the Roman myths, in the Greek myths, he's Ares. Mars rules Aries, but they spell it in the Greek myths A-R-E-S. As we move into the Roman, we get Mars. Now, there's a difference. I use this example because there's a difference. In the Greek version, in the earlier versions, here we have a young, buffed-out jock who doesn't care about who's fighting what war, who doesn't care who he's killing, who's very impulsive, and who's having affairs right and left. Not thinking before he acts, or not thinking before she acts. Impulsive. As you move into the Roman Mars, we see the gladiator who enters the ring, who has to think before he moves, has to know the opponent, has to think about what tools. Mars has to do with tools. It has to do with literally tools. Think gladiator tools, iron, steel, surgical things. And when he goes into the ring, he has to know who his opponent is. And he has to learn how not to react when his opponent does whatever his opponent does. So the challenge with Mars energy is to decipher between reacting versus strategizing. In other words, learning how not to react, but to think about what's going to be plan B, what's going to be plan C, what's going to be plan D. Now, Mars has to do with spending, too. People's mentality in terms of spending. That's why when Mars goes retrograde every couple of years, that's one example. There's other examples. Sometimes people will not spend as much. They'll just stop spending, or they're spending on the wrong things, or they're misfiring. And I think that's a great phrase to use because we started the war in Kosovo on a Mars retrograde, and I'm a little nervous about the war coming up with Iraq because if it happens this month, I hope it doesn't happen, but you know, we are very shortly going into a Mars pre-shadow position. And the United States, in fact, Bush's inaugural chart had Mars, the god of war, right on the 7th house, you know, which is about, there's going to be a war during his term, at least talk of war. But we had the Kosovo thing, retrograde Mars. This year, Mars is going to go retrograde in Pisces. So, you know, it's not a good idea to start things on retrogrades because usually it doesn't come out the way you think it's going to come out. And as far as your trading goes, and I'm not a trader, but people stop spending the way they spend, or you may mis-strategize, or you may misjudge on a Mars retrograde. You don't stop doing it because it's like a 2-month period. But you have to really think about if this doesn't work, what will happen then. Now, the other thing with Mars, because remember we talked in the beginning about how all the planets have a relationship with each other? Okay, let's talk about this. This is just simple, simple, simple stuff. So simple, it's ridiculous, actually. We know that we're looking at this. This is the warrior or the warrior woman. Mars is the gladiator. I'll remember that. All right, so Mars is traveling around through the sky. Travel, 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 okay? Remember our 45 degrees, our 90 degrees, our hard angles. All right. What if Jupiter's coming along in the sky? Jupiter looks like a giant half cup holding things, okay? Jupiter has a lot to do with abundance, overspending, fortune. What happens in one of these times when these two come together on a hard angle? What, with Mars is spending and Jupiter is sometimes overextending yourself, what might happen?
Party.
It could party, it could be high price, right? Or people are spending more, because we're talking cosmic psychology here, right? Okay. And so that's something to look at, Jupiter, Mars, right? Now, let's change this. Let's pretend, which happens a lot during the year because Mars is so fast, right? Saturn, Father Time, the god who ate the kids, okay? Because Saturn did eat his children, all right? Saturn's coming along, coming along, coming along, and Mars is coming along, and they come to one of those hard angles.
Confusion.
What might happen? Confusion. People may stop. Saturn is frozen energy. Okay? What else might happen? They don't spend. Or maybe the price is low. If it's a hard angle. If it's a hard angle. Okay? There's a big difference between those two. You know? Okay, let's try another one. Oh, this is a great one. Whoa, this is a great one. This is a great one. Okay, now this is an outer planet. You know, we have to take everything into consideration. But here we have the pitchfork, the sea god, Neptune, Poseidon, all right? Now, you know, Neptune is a very interesting planet because it is not of this world. It actually, it isn't of this world. It's made of gas. It rules petroleum, plastic, oil. It rules Pisces, of course. It rules the oceans. Aquatics, you know, and I think with Uranus coming into Pisces, we're going to need a lot of water, improved water systems and desalinization plants, and there's going to be a lot of issues around water the next few years, and I think that's an area that we need to pay attention to. It rules pharmaceuticals. It rules fog and confusion. Fog and confusion in the real world. It's the water. It's interesting. What happens when you put water in your hands? Can you hold the water? No. What happens to the water? Falls through, right? So just for a moment you think you have it and then it goes away and it just sort of moves, all right? So if we have some really big Neptune transits going through the sky, we see a lot of mergers with companies during Neptune transits where there's a redistribution of resources. Neptune has a lot to do with bringing 2 or 3 or 4 different bodies together into kind of an amoeba format, okay? Neptune, and you know, not all the planets are either good or bad. They both have their challenges and their benefits. But if, for example, you see, let's look at Mars as spending, all right? Mars does move fairly quickly, so it wouldn't be a long-term period because it's a quick planet. If it was a slower planet, it would be different. But say Mars is coming along and it comes to a hard angle with Neptune. What? You're what? Oh, okay. Spending, or it can be debt. Mars, Neptune can be high debt. Neptune has a lot to do with credit card debt, people overestimating what's happening, or not everything being on the table. Okay? Or an action that's being taken. Mars is an action that gets dissolved or turns direction. Okay? Let's try another one. Let's try, who should we try next? Who? Oh, Uranus is good. That's a good one. Okay. Okay, now Uranus is a tricky looking thing. How can you remember that this is Uranus? Well, if you want to think about it this way, this is just a graphic think. You know, we talked about earlier how Saturn up until 1781 was the outer bounds of the universe. There was no other planets, right? If you think about this portion here being the universe up till 1781, and then think about, here's this outer planet that's suddenly discovered that's on its side. All the other planets are vertical. Uranus orbits on its side. They knew something was out there because every time the planets were in orbit and going into that part of the sky, they would be thrown out of orbit. So it has a lot to do with electrical currents. It has a lot to do with public information, has a lot to do with media, multimedia, the internet, computers, the big dealers, as my teacher in Chicago used to tell me, like the big developers versus the real estate agent, okay? The wholesalers versus the individual retail person. It has to do, let's see, Uranus has to do with, there's so many things. It rules astrology, of course, but it rules cycles, literally rules cycles. And so it's very erratic in its orbit, very erratic. And in fact, every 7 years, and you have to give it 6 to 8 years, but every 7 years, it moves through one constellation in the sky, finishes, and it goes to the next 7 years. So it has what we call literally a 7-year cycle that's extremely erratic. And I always call it kind of like the antenna to God, kind of waking up to possibilities. There can be, it's modern inventions, it's thinking outside of the box, it's breaking the rules, it's waking up to a new way of doing things, kind of like that thing you do sometimes, oh my God, why didn't I think of doing this? That's a Uranus moment, all right? So if you see, and you really have to look at other factors, if you see Mars coming along and hitting Uranus, you're going to have probably a fairly up and down kind of cycle because you don't know. You've got to look at the other factors that are going on. But it can also trigger an opportunity. Mars is the trigger in the gun. Uranus is, you know, Uranus has a lot of bad press because they say it rules earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes, and yeah, it does. But it really has to do with being in the right place at the right time. It has to do with find a need and fill it. It has to do with inventors, inventions that nobody else thought about. For example, March 10th of this year, 2003, to late September of 2003, Uranus is entering Pisces, the constellation of Pisces. Last time it was at this position was 1919 until 1927. Now, I could give you the whole list of what was going on in 1919 to 1927, but it was the era of prohibition. It was when the Nazis rose to power in Europe. It was when, I had just went through a whole lecture on this in San Francisco area. It was, oh, I wish I brought those notes with me. I don't have them. But it does rule water and oceans. And I actually think we're going to have some issues with our water systems and our water management systems and our water supply systems and our water cleansing systems. It rules alcohol and drugs. It has to do with things that are outside of our reality. In other words, things that we don't see. And a good example might be, and this might not be a really good example, but recently I heard on the news that when they were trying to track Osama bin Laden, they were trying to track him with a cell phone. And he gave the cell phone to somebody else, and our technocracy thought, oh, wow, this is where he is. Well, you know, simple thinking said, here, take my cell phone and go someplace else, right? Well, that's Uranus and Pisces. I think we're going to see lots of that. A lot of things that we don't see that are hidden that are going to come out again. I think there's going to be a lot of breaking of rules. I think there's going to be a lot of big mergers with a lot of big companies because Pisces is ruled by Neptune, which is big mergers, you know. I actually think, and this is going to sound insane probably at this point, but you know, with the problem that the airline industries are having, you know, the bailouts, and I know this may not be possible, I keep thinking somehow, even though the government keeps bailing them out, the government may start to own part of it with that, you know. Is that part of the plan? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, because I said that a couple of years ago in Civilization. We had a book on it, and I thought, you know, they're going to be in debt, and the government's going to take over. Okay.
For U.S. Airways buyout or bailout plan, the government gets 20% of the stock.
Huh.
Of the new stock. The old stock, they just want to give it up.
Okay. Well, this is good. Okay. Synthetic oil, yes.
George, I think one of the key things too for the market with Uranus is change.
Change. Sudden.
Sudden moves.
Sudden
So
moves.
January 15th, Mars trying Uranus, the market.
Yeah. Right. When you have when you have an aspect to Uranus, especially I would say a harder aspect like one of those eight-fold ones, you're going to see a change. Okay. But here's another point. Obviously, since Uranus, you know, moves only 3 or 4 degrees a year, you're not going to see a whole lot. But you want to watch the days on which, for example, it retrogrades. It goes direct. Those are big days. And it shadows. The shadow afterwards. And the shadow that's coming up for Uranus, I had mentioned a little bit earlier, and you can just do this by looking at your own ephemeris, is the 18th of February, which is a Tuesday. And it's also, interestingly enough, the day after February 17th when the sun lines up with Uranus. Okay. Monday, February 17th. Sunday, February 16th, there's a full moon with Uranus on the full moon. And on Tuesday the 18th, Uranus, and Wednesday the 19th, Uranus reaches its shadow position. So the 16th through the 19th or 20th, and then the 21st, Saturn goes direct. That's an interesting week. Lots of change. Could shift. You know, or some news breaks out suddenly that we have no, out of the blue. It usually comes out from left or right field. You know, some big surprise. Or maybe that's when they start their so-called war, which is unfortunate. Okay, let's see what else we have. What other planets? Let's look at some other planets. Let's look at Sun, Moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune.
About Jupiter trying Pluto. Pluto in the summer, I think, is the
Jupiter
Jupiter trying
trine?
Pluto.
Okay. Yeah, that is in the summer. In fact, it goes direct April 3rd, 03, direct. Pluto goes direct August 26th, 03, direct. Goes direct at 8 degrees of Leo, and Pluto will be at 17 degrees Sag all summer. So it's sometime, let's see, when is that? Where's my book? Yeah, let's look at that. Jupiter, Pluto trine. It's probably in the calendar. I'll find it there faster, but okay, here we go. Pluto, Jupiter, July 1st. July 1st, late June, somewhere in there. Okay. Now Jupiter, actually Jupiter's interesting. Jupiter means there's a lot. Okay. So for example, and this is a silly example, but it really is true. Jupiter takes 12 years to make a cycle around the sun, which means if there's 12 signs, about how much time does it spend in each constellation? A year, right? Give or take a few months. All right. Jupiter is sort of like this. Well, Jupiter is kind of the public pulse that's positive, optimistic, overindulgent too. You always have to look at both sides. Whatever sign Jupiter's traveling through, for example, in clothes, you see this a lot with clothes. When Jupiter's in Leo, all the clothes have gold or gold thread. Okay? You could actually have 12 boxes of clothing, and you will have the same styles every 12 years, all right? When Jupiter's in Pisces, everybody wants to look poor, and they have blue jeans that are ripped, and they pay $60, okay? When Jupiter is in Capricorn, everything is black, gray, or brown, okay? When Jupiter's in Taurus, there's a lot of suedes, a lot of browns, all right? When Jupiter's in Aries, you see a lot of red. And in fact, you can actually see the colors of the cars they make every year, you know? When Jupiter was in Aquarius, all the cars were purple. When Jupiter's in Virgo, which is coming up this fall, all the cars are white, you know? Which is the best insurance car to have, apparently. They give you better insurance rate on white cars than they do on red cars, okay? When Jupiter is in, you know, and you can go through this, you can actually see what trends come about. Now, each one of these sectors, because we were supposed to discuss the sectors, each sign has sectors, okay? So let's play with this. We talked about Jupiter and Cancer. Okay, prices of, a lot of restaurants opening up the last few years, you know? Overabundance, not of houses, but of housing prices, at least on the West Coast, okay? A lot of really fat people, you know, because it's food, it's moon, it's food, Jupiter and Cancer. The United States is a Cancer, all right? And they're finding out the fat in the fast foods now. Jupiter in Gemini, you see lots of communication things going on. You know, new this, new that. And actually, in the last couple of years, they started developing I mean, I think it's fascinating. They have these pocket PCs now. The Palms have already been, forget it. You don't even need those anymore because you have a little magic wand, all right, that will take you anywhere and connect you to anything, okay? And Uranus going into Pisces is the invisible. You know, literally, people will have these PCs where they can go anywhere, call anybody, and not even need a modem because they're wireless. Invisible communication. I think it's fascinating, which could actually take us to like invisible, you know, bombers and, you know, the illusion, you know, the thing, there's actually talk of having something that's like a mirror image. Jupiter in Aries, that's ruled by Mars, that's war stuff. Steel, surgical, iron, diamonds. It may mean that something is either plentiful, so the price is low, or people are paying too much, okay? That's why you want to watch, like, our circumstances now. I mentioned earlier, Jupiter was in Cancer last year, housing was high. Saturn's going into Cancer next June for 2.5 years. Doesn't mean housing is going to be low. Could be limited amounts of housing. Could be we don't have the same great mortgage rates we've been having, so it's more difficult to get a house, okay? What about Leo? Leo is ruled by the sun. Some people think the sun rules gold. Now, Jupiter's in Leo right now, and there's a lot of talk about gold right now. Yes?
Not gold's going up.
Yeah, it's going up, and there's a lot of arguments about how when we went off the gold standard, we really basically screwed ourselves, and there's a lot of talk about beginning to do that again. Yes?
Gold was 301 August 1st. When Jupiter went to Leo, it was 382 today.
Really? Say that again, 380?
$301 on August 1st.
August 1st
When Jupiter went to Leo.
into Leo, okay.
That day, it was 301.
301 on the day it went into Leo.
Gold,
And
Uh-huh.
now
382, it just said 382 high the other day. I don't know what it is today.
Okay, because Jupiter's in Leo. Okay. And you know, that's interesting because back, I think it was in, I think it was 79, August 79. Jupiter was in Leo. Gold was up at 800 something.
24 years ago.
Huh?
People were standing on Royal Street in New Orleans with all their silver dishes and everything.
With their silver and their gold. Okay. Okay. Okay, now this is interesting. This is a great segue. It's almost 3:45. But this is the segue for the currency thing. And this may take more than 3 minutes. All right, then we'll take a break at 4 to do your exercises. All right, any questions thus far? Okay, guys and gals. All right, here we do. Erase this. This is really, 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 really important. This is probably the second most important thing you should remember today, okay? So write it down in your notebooks, okay? Or maybe it's third. Declinations are pretty important, but 3. Do you work at all with eclipses?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's like the primary thing that I mean, I do everything, but the eclipses are the timing devices of the zodiac. You were born on an eclipse. Perfect, perfect. Well, you know, we were talking about trends just now. We were talking when Jupiter every 12 years goes through something, it kind of brings things up. But there's actually even a more measurable trend cycle, okay? And that's the lunar node cycle, which is also the eclipse cycle. And that's the one thing to get real clear right away, because even seasoned astrologers don't know this, that the lunar nodes run with the eclipses. A lot of people don't know that. They say, oh, gee, and it was an eclipse. Well, eclipses and the lunar nodes run together, okay? Now, if you look in the ephemeris, first of all, before we do that, there's a north node and a south node, which looks very close to Leo, right? But it's not. Think of the north node as being a head with hoops on the ears. It's not the same as Leo with a mane of hair. God bless you. Okay. This is called the north node technically, but a less technical term, which is easier to remember, is the dragon's head. And the very opposite point to that is the south node, which is the dragon's tail. And they always, these two, they're not planets, they're spaces in time. What they are is we have the orbit of the Earth around the sun. This is the Earth, and then the moon is going around the Earth. And where the moon's orbit is intersecting the orbit of the Earth around the sun, that's a node. Okay, that's a position. So there's a north and there's a south. And I call them kind of like black holes, but they literally run on what we call an 18.6-year cycle, which is a very common cycle, I know, in any kind of investment or trading cycle, as is 9.25. I just say 9.3, which is actually half of this, if you can see that, right? Okay. The way they work is the north node, the dragon's head, will literally, for 18.6 years, literally orbit. Okay, you'll see it orbiting through all the signs of the zodiac. It spends about 1.5 years in each opposite constellation. In other words, right now the north node is in Gemini. So the opposite of Gemini is what? Sagittarius, right? So if the north node is going through Gemini, the south node is going to be complementary in Sagittarius. And on April 16th, this is an important date, folks. Write it down. The north node enters Taurus because it goes backwards. It looks like it's moving backwards. And the south node goes through Scorpio. Now, it spends about 1.5 years in these two opposite points. And the way I explain it to people is where the north node is moving, which is the dragon's head, is where there's a lot of challenges, and you see a lot of growth and a lot of trends. A lot of people looking at issues, even though they don't want to look at the issues. And the reason I say that is because it's the dragon's head in ancient times when the ancient Chinese would see an eclipse in the sky, literally a total eclipse, when the sun would go away, they would be very frightened because there was no earth power, there was no sun. And they believed that there was a dragon in the sky that was eating the sun, okay? And the reason the dragon was eating the sun was because the dragon needed to change, shift, and grow into a new power. So he's eating the sun. You know it's going to burn his mouth when he eats the sun. It's going to go through his stomach, and for a while they're just trembling because they don't know if they're going to have life, and then it comes out through the tail. Well, the dragon's head is where we take risks, okay? It's where there's trends happening, where we need to look at things, and where the tail is moving is literally, the tail. People like to hold on to the tail, but if you hold on, it's like crack the whip, you eventually get thrown off, okay? So coming up in April of 2003, the dragon's head is going to Taurus, and the dragon's tail is going to go into Scorpio. Now, let's think about this. Let's just think about this. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Taurus is like copper, okay? Taurus is agriculture. Taurus is fabrics. Taurus is currencies, monies, values. The tail is going to be moving through Scorpio, ruled by Pluto, which rules the banks. Tail throwing off the banks, currencies. I think we're starting because remember our basic pattern that we worked with today. That same pattern. We always go back to that same pattern because everything is a relationship to everything else. If the north node, the head, is at, say, right now, where is it today? About 5 degrees, Gemini? About 5, maybe? Which means, because it goes backwards, it's really close to Taurus, right? Which is 29 Taurus. See how it goes back this way, all right? South node is about 5 Sag right now, and we'll be going back to about 29 Scorpio in April of 2003. Okay, so they're always at a 180-degree distance from each other, always. What you want to watch is when there's a major planet creating a hard angle to it. And right now, Uranus, transiting Uranus in the sky, which shakes things up a lot. Sudden change cycles, and also can mutate in a way. It can kind of invent new things out of old things. It is in the sky at exactly a 90-degree angle to this axis, which is one of the reasons we're having a lot of chaos right now in the world. And I don't know if the markets are pretty chaotic, but I suspect that they are going to be a little bit more chaotic as we move into the spring. And this is also people waking up to currency shifts. North Taurus is currency. I look at Taurus as being currency. And I have this feeling that, when Saturn went into Taurus about 3 years ago, that's when the whole Euro thing was beginning. They were having problems. They couldn't get enough of the countries to come together. Some people made it, some people didn't. They finally did it. Now all through Europe they have this dollar. Now the euro is actually very close on the par with the US dollar, and actually some days is higher, okay? And I have a few of clients that work in the currency markets, and I have always said this. I don't think it's happening right away. I think we're heading towards a world currency. I think we're heading to currency shifts. I think we're heading, and I think that part of this is this whole eclipse cycle going on here, plus the fact, if this is in Aquarius now, watch your ephemeris. Right now, Neptune is at 10 or 11 Aquarius, right? Or 12. Watch Neptune when it gets very close to Pisces, which is in about another 7 to 10 years. Because 7 to 10 years from now, 9 years from now, or 18 years from now, does anybody have an ephemeris for, I wonder if I have one. No, this just goes through 2010. Does anybody have a blue book? Nobody has the blue book? It's too bad. Well, you have the blue book, the blue ephemeris for the 21st century. You don't well, if you guys have it, get it. If you don't have it, get it, because it takes you out to 2050. And just go look at the next time when the North Node in 18 years is in Taurus and Neptune is very close to the square to that, because I think we're seeing currency shifts with this right now. Plus, I think there's going to be a lot of bank closings coming up with the South Node going through Scorpio. And the way you can track cycles with this is really simple. Go back 18.6 years, 18.6 years, 18.6 years, 18.6 years, because 18.6 years ago, the nodes were at the same position they are now. So that would be 84, 84, 85, 86, where they're moving into. And then the time before that would have been, let's do some quick math in my brain, 60, it would have been 65, 66, 67, somewhere in there. Okay, and then the time before that would have been 18.6, 47, about 40, 1947. You'd have to check that. And then you look at the half cycles too, because the half cycles would be at 9.3 when the North Node was then in Scorpio and the South Node was in Taurus, which if you look 9 or so years ago, from 2002, that's 93, 92, 93, which we were having Persian Gulf. 9 years before that would have been about 80, 84, 85, 84, 83, somewhere in there, and just mark it that way, all right? Always look to see what's happening, if there's any hard angle, slow planets at an angle, because that'll give you a sense of what's happening with markets or with movements, as well as with trends. Now, eclipses. This is important. This is the important part. The eclipses, an eclipse will only happen at either a new moon position or at a full moon position. You can never, ever, ever have an eclipse at any other phase of the moon in any other part. It's either got to be at a new moon or a full moon. It's not at every new moon and full moon. It's about every 6 months, all right? And it will either happen close to the North Node end, or the Dragon's Head end, or the South Node end. Now, let's just, and it's again, we're going to go back to our famous eightfold cycle. All right, now let's just play a game here. And actually in my calendar, I show you with those bomb dates. If we go back to November 19th, 2002, that was very recent, so this is something we can mark, okay? On that date, there was a lunar eclipse, a full moon eclipse. Full moon in the ephemeris looks like this. Empty barbells. Okay? And a full moon eclipse, which is a lunar eclipse, is filled in barbells. All right? And actually, in your packet that I gave you, in fact, this makes it easier. Everybody, go through your packet and pull out the handwritten dynamic report that says 2003 PST eclipses, 18 months. Okay. And I've got my little pointer here so I can show you. You all have that in your packet? If I can get the, all right. Now, just keep it, we'll keep it really simple. On February 1st this year, 2003, the moon was, that's a conjunction there with one circle. That's conjunction, that's 0 degrees. A conjunction always falls at 0 degrees, the beginning of a cycle. Okay, a new moon is the beginning of the lunar cycle, right? Okay. On February 16th, which we were just talking about a few minutes ago, we have the moon opposite the sun. Excuse me. February 16th, moon opposite the sun, which happens to be also when Uranus is next to the sun, when Uranus is coming back to its retrograde position. That's going to be an interesting week, okay? Go down April, go down May. We keep seeing the conjunction, the opposition, don't we? Now look at this. May 15th. Moon, but there's a filled-in conjunction point. Can you see that? And if you look at your ephemeris, which was just here 2 shakes ago, if you look at your ephemeris page, you can see it right here. Oh, I'll just point to it. The ephemeris page will always show you where the new moon is. In this is May of 2003. The new moon is on the 1st of May at 10 degrees of Taurus, 43 minutes. The first quarter moon on May of 9th is at 18 Leo, 27. That's the first 90 degrees, the first half. The full moon, May 16th, 24 Scorpio, 53. But oh, look. Here we have the barbell. See that filled-in barbell? That's actually an opposition filled in. That's a lunar eclipse falling on the full moon. It's at 24 Scorpio, right there. 2 weeks later, we have a new moon, 9 Gemini, but it happens to be an eclipse, a solar eclipse, filled in conjunction point at 9 Gemini. That's how you can tell when these eclipses come, is when they're filled in. And that's what I have on your little ephemeris page here, so you don't have to think about it too much. You can just scan it and go mark these. And you can run these off on several programs. This is from Solar Fire. Now, let's go back to November 19th of 2002. In fact, I want to make sure I get this right. I think it was 27 or 28, but I just want to check. Yeah, it was 27:33. On that day, there was a full moon, 27 degrees Taurus, 33 minutes. It was also a lunar eclipse. That's how you see a lunar eclipse, like an opposition filled in, all right? Here's our famous pattern. At the time, the North Node was in somewhere in early Gemini, because as it'll always be hanging either at the sign or a sign either side of it. You won't see, for example, the North Node, if you're going to have a Taurus moon, you're not going to see it at, this is a full moon, excuse me, I shouldn't have done that. This means that down here was 27 degrees of sun, was at 27 Scorpio that day, and the moon that day was at 27. The North Node was, yeah, that's right, North Node was here, and the South Node's down here somewhere. All right, so this is a date. This is November 19th, 2002. Now, it's really 87 days, but I always say 90 days just to make it easy. 3 months after this full moon, which happens to be, in this case, February 16th of 2003. It's 3 months. It's actually 87 days. There's going to be a full moon on February 16th at 27 degrees. 27 degrees. Does that look like a pretty familiar number? Leo and some change. First of all, I want you to look at the number. Here we have a 27, and here we have a 27. I mean, this is about as perfect an example as you can get. I mean, if this could be 27, and this could maybe be 24 or 23 or 29, but they're actually here. All right, now, this is Taurus, and this is Leo. Now, have you all worked with the modes, the cardinal? You haven't. Okay, important. I'm just trying to figure out the easiest way to teach you this, because it's very important. Would you say these are an easy aspect or hard aspect? These are hard, right? Okay. Now let's look at this. There's 3 modes in astrology. Really simple. There's the cardinal. Those are the scouts who kick down the doors, and they don't really finish the job, but they're really good at starting things, okay? Those are the Aries. Energy, just the energy, the sign. Aries looks like a ram's head, exactly a ram's head butting down the door. Okay, then you have Cancer, which looks like two containers floating, or 2 containers. Look at this as 2 containers floating. Then you have Libra, which is the scales of justice, the blind lady of justice holding the scales. It looks like scales, actually. And then you have the last one, which was Capricorn, the sea goat. You've seen the old pictures of Capricorn. It looks like a goat's head and a fish's tail. That's what this is, a goat's head with the horns and a fish's tail. That's Capricorn. Those are what we call the cardinal modes. And they are the action points in the zodiac. In other words, the seasons come, they're in your packet. First day of spring is Aries. That's an action point. First day of summer is Cancer. That's an action point. Those are cardinal signs. The action starts at that quarter. That's when we watch, when you do a lot of economic forecasting, you look to see exactly where the planets were as the sun was entering Aries, or as the sun was entering Cancer, or as the sun was entering Capricorn, or as the sun was entering Libra, and whatever that is at that moment. I always do it for DC because I'm in the US. Whatever's going on, that's the chart for that next quarter. Things start at the action points. They're not good at finishing, but they're good at starting. That's when the roots come out of the, when the flowers come out of the earth, or the fruit finally breaks through the ground in summer. Okay. Cardinal points. They are all starters, but they're not very good neighbors. They're great starters, but they're not very neighborly because they all want to be boss, basically, all right? And they are all, in the zodiac, 90 degrees away from each other. Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. They're all 90 degrees away from each other. That's the cardinal action scouting mode, okay? The second mode is very important, and that's in regard to this example. The second mode is what we call the fixed. First, we have the people kicking down the door and starting the action, but not finishing anything, right? Okay. Then we have the people that are going to sit there and finish the action, even if it kills them. You know, they're going to be fixed. They're not moving. They're going to work hard. They're going to get it done. They may be boring, but they get it done, okay? And it's very tangible energy. It's fixed, okay? So it's what comes after Aries? Taurus, right? The bull with the bull's head. Or as Jim Shear, a teacher of mine, used to say, think of it as a cow. Because it eats slowly, moves slowly, and treads a path, okay? That's Taurus, all right? The next 90-degree sign away from Taurus, in terms of fixed energy, not stuck, but fixed, could be stuck, is Leo, the lion with the big mane of hair. That looks like a mane of hair. Think of the lion with the hair, okay? That's 90 degrees away from Taurus. If you wanted to pop it in this model, it's the same model. 90 degrees, or 3 months roughly later, is Scorpio, which is the scorpion with the open tail. Scorpio. Yeah, people get confused between Scorpio and Virgo. There's a difference. The scorpion's tail is out. Virgo's tail is closed. It's contained. Okay? Okay, so that's 90 degrees. That's fixed, stubborn, fixed. And then the last fixed is the man or woman pouring water, which is Aquarius, which really is not a water sign, it's an air sign. And what he or she is doing is they're pouring the waters of knowledge and information. That's why Aquarius is associated with the information age. You know, if you read any of Alan Toffler's book, he was talking about the first, the second, and the third. Okay, so these are all 90 degrees away from each other, and they're all good at getting things done because they're fixed. They all do it differently, just like the other group, because one's an earth, one's a fire, one's a water, one's an air. You know, in nature we have 4 elements. But they don't really get along because they all want to be boss too. Okay? Then the last group is what we call well, I call them the movables, but that's not the official name. They are the mutables, actually. Great people to have as a sales force because they're multitaskers. They can do a lot of different things at one time, and things are more changeable with mutables. They're always juggling while they're moving, okay? So the first mutable sign is the twins, Gemini, Castor and Pollux. Falls around late May through late June. 90 days later, 90 degrees later, is Virgo, the closed tail, okay? 90 days later is Sagittarius, the Native American arrow, the visionary, the arrow pointing out, directional. Sag. And 90 days later is the 2 fish swimming in opposite directions, trying to make up their mind. That's Pisces. These are all the mutable, movable groups, okay? And I don't know, they don't fight as much because they're, well, where do you want to go to dinner? Where do you want to go to dinner? Where do you want to go to dinner? But the point is they're all different in the way they go to dinner, okay? Now, you've got the cardinal, the scouts, you've got the fixed that gets the job done, and you've got the mutables which juggle. Those are the three different groups that are all bosses. There's a lot of, everybody wants to be a chief and nobody wants to be a cook, okay? So, going back to the idea of the eclipses, the fixed mode, which is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. The fixed mode is where the eclipses are going to be now with the nodes, Taurus and Scorpio, right? So we had an eclipse November 19th, 2002. It was in Scorpio, Taurus, 27 degrees. 90 days later, on February 16th of 2003, we're going to have a full moon. This was a full moon, so we have to match moons, right? If this was a new moon, we'd look at this as a new moon. If it's a full, we look at a full. This is a stress point here. This is 90 days after the eclipse. And if in my calendar, I always put these bombs in those. Probably not a good choice now, but I was using bombs before we had war problems. But those are days where there's a lot of changes that you'll see in the markets. Lots of things come up as a result of something that was going on here. It's like this is the evolution of the yearly cycle. So if we go, this is November, this is February, March, April, May. That's the next ones, right? Now let's look at May again. 3 months later, we've got, now it's really hard to see because it's so small, or you can see it on the other sheet that you have. It's hard to see it, but see right there where you have this full moon here, the 16th of May, which on the West Coast really is the 15th of May. It's a 20, see how it says 24 Scorpio, 53, that open-tailed person? Okay, this is going to be May 15th of 03. This is it's a full moon again, but it's another eclipse. So here we're dealing with 90 and 180, but this is like a double whammy. There's something that's tied in here, 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 and then 90 days after that would be roughly about mid-August sometime, August 15th. I don't know what the exact date, when there's a full moon in Leo. Now, this is how you use the eclipses. You watch to see when they hit whatever. For example, I use it in company charts or people charts. I'm sure if you're doing a trade or something, you can look at something that you work with trades, and you can actually follow this pattern literally as it's basic geometry is what this is. And if I see this happening in a certain chart, then I'm going to look at 3 months later where this is going to hit in that chart, and I'm going to be able to tell them a story of change that results from this. Usually when the eclipse hits, there's trouble in River City. You don't see how to solve it. You just know that there's a problem. You can't see it, though, because the definition of an eclipse is a temporary loss of light, and you see a shadow. First quarter square, remember we talked about the first quarter square, is when you finally see what the issue is, when something is resolved. Now, I know that this whole thing with Iraq has been going on for a very long time. I know that. But if you go back and you check late October, November, that's when a lot of this stuff started heating up. Okay? Now, I'm looking at that week of February 16th of the full moon, plus we have Sun next to Uranus, explosive possibilities, plus we have Uranus at the shadow position, same week, that whole week. Something's going to happen that week, either with the markets or with the history or something, all right? Then you look 3 months later, mid-May. 3 months later, mid-August. Okay? Now, that was for the full moon. All right, now we can use it for the new moon or the solar eclipses. And the full moons have to do usually with the people and kind of like the larger thinking of the cosmos, so to speak. The new moons or the solar eclipses have to do with events and leaders of the world. Okay? Now, they have to do with events and leaders of the world. I mean, I do a whole day on this, so I'm only giving you a little bit because I want you to do your exercise. Okay? Then we're going to do the exercise. I know we're running a little late, but... Okay, we're going to still put the same thing in there, right? I didn't add this in here because actually you can actually watch to see in between the cycle. There's a midpoint there, which, we don't want to go there right now. We want to keep this really simple. So let's look at December 3rd of 2002. On December 3rd of 2002, there was a new moon. New moons always happen at 0 degrees, right? I mean, that's the beginning of a cycle, right? It was at 12 degrees of Sagittarius and some change. So, remember our three groups? We have the scouts, right? The Aries, the Cancer, the Capricorn, and the Libra. And in fact, if you want to verify what I'm saying, this is in your book. This is how you start learning it. I actually have, this is an old sheet that I found. It's at the end of your booklet. It's probably second or the last page. Second to the last page, maybe?
You're right.
Oh, it's there? Good. Okay, this is very old. This is before, this is so old, I hate to say it. This is before computers. This is like the executive typewriter. It just fell out right before I left, and I thought, well, I'll use that. This is just for the cardinal points. But here we have the first day of spring equinox, right? Then we're moving to the summer, first day of summer. Then we go to first day of fall, and we go to first day of winter. Those are the action points in the zodiac. And those are what we call the cardinals. The next group is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio. It's all in sequence, Aquarius. They're the fixed, stubborn, we're going to get it done. Also, it has a lot to do with security issues, money issues. Fixed people, fixed energy, doesn't like to let go of its security stuff. Okay, so anytime you have eclipses in fixed signs for a year and a half, you're going to have issues around money stuff. Or outer planets like Saturn and Taurus, issues around values and money. Anything that's in a fixed sign is issues around values and money. All right. So if we look at December 3rd of 2002, we had, because, you know, this is Scorpio over here. Well, we were just finishing the Gemini-Sagittarius cycle. Okay, so as you're finishing one, you have one dying on the vine, you got another one starting. So this is new moon 12 Sag. 3 months later, again, we want to look 3 months later. We want to look to see where the new moon is going to be. That's going to be in this group, the movable, mutable group. Now, let's just do something here, because you guys have this sheet in front of you. Mutables were, let's see, Sag, they were Pisces, they were Virgo, closed tail, 2 fish, arrow, and, come on, Georgia, Gemini, thank you. Okay, so if this one is part of this group, we need to know that the sequence to this would be what? Pisces comes after Sag, right? So we're going to look for a new moon in Pisces, are we not? We're going to go to this sheet. You can go to the ephemeris, but I tried to make it easy with this. And I know we're getting energy block right now. I can feel it. So if you look at March 2nd, 2003, where is March? Yeah, March 2nd, 2003, 12 Pisces, 6 minutes. Moon conjuncts is together with the sun. They're together. They're a conjunction. They're the new moon. March 2nd, 2003, 12. So this date here would be March 2nd, 2003. See, that's exactly 90 days after that. Okay? Now, let's go one further. If we have, I don't know if it'll give it. Yeah, it will. It will. Let's go down the list here. We know that it's 3 months. They're always 3 months apart, right? They're 90 degrees apart. So Sag, Pisces. What comes after Pisces? Gemini, right? And then we know after Gemini comes Virgo. Closed tail. All right, Gemini. Let's go down our list. Let's look for where Gemini is. If there's any Gemini in here at all, maybe there isn't. Here it is, right here. May 30th happens to be an eclipse, a solar eclipse. See that? May 30th at 9. It's pretty close. Moon conjunct Sun, May 30th, 9 Gemini. It's a solar eclipse. These are important. By the way, these are important because these are about the last 2 of the cycle. I always call the last ones, the leftovers, I call those the Chernobyl eclipses. Because at the end of the series, you know, they usually start the new series and then they have this leftover 1 or 2 from the old series. That's when things like the 80, what was the crash in the markets, 87? That was right at one of those Chernobyl eclipses. Chernobyl blew up on one of these eclipses. I mean, I have a whole list of dates on the leftover eclipses. So this one is May 30th, 03. And then I don't know how much power this is going to have, but I still want to give it some credence because it's a little off. See how we're getting over here to, let's see, September. Yeah, we're getting, see how on August 27th, it's a new moon. It's Virgo, but it's 4 degrees. See how our numbers are starting to wander around now? See, this is a 4. This is a 9. Oh, we didn't put the number here. This was a 12 degree. This is pretty strong because this is very close to that degree, isn't it? It's the same degree. Here it's pretty close too. It's about 3 off, but now we're getting a little weak over here. So these are really important. You can use these in your personal life, or you can use these in your company charts, or you can use them just to watch your trading. Watch if you have records of your trading. What was going on with the things you trade on a certain date? Then watch these 3-month cycles, these 6-month cycles, these 9-month cycles. Just watch them. And watch, if you can, if you want to get there, the 45-day distances. It's really probably going to be about 42 to 45 days from these dates, and see what happens. They're really important, though. Yes?
Kind of interesting, I think Mars is at perihelion on August 27th.
Oh, is it August 27th? That's also when Pluto goes direct, around that time. Yeah. See, that's the whole thing. If we could have a program where all these things come together at one time and go, oh my God, that's it. But I don't program things, but I think that would be a great thing. Okay, so here's what we're going to do now. I lost all of you, I think, at the end. It looks like you're exhausted, you're tired, you're worn out, and you're ready to just go home and party, right? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break in the action, and we're going to team up in groups. How many? We got 2, 4, 6. Oh, perfect. We have exactly. I don't want you two to be together, though. Okay? I'm gonna actually pair you two together, you two together, you two together, and you two together. Okay? Just right across the table. And I want you to go in separate parts of the room. But before you do that, let me show you what you're going to do. You're going to get your sheets. Can I erase this? Now, the reason we're doing this is to show you how to figure out when you're just looking at the ephemeris, especially, I mean, the thing about the ephemeris that's great, which I love, is that it will always show you the new moon, the full moon. It'll show you the moon cycles. It'll show you when it's the first quarter or last quarter. What the ephemeris does not show you is the relationship between two planets, whether they're a first quarter relationship, a last quarter relationship. It does not show you that. So if you're working with, looking at maybe Saturn-Mars cycles, for example, see what happens to them. You don't know if Mars is in a first quarter relationship to Saturn, which means it's growing, or if it's in a dying on the vine last quarter, the end of the line aspect, because it's dying. They both look like 90, right? You just don't know. And that's a problem for a lot of people. And there's a very simple way to do it, which is why I'm breaking you up into groups. You all have your little famous 8-fold cycle thing, right? You can draw it on a piece of paper and just take this one home and just make copies of it, but just for the exercise, put it on the paper. What I want you to do is pick 2 planets, and I'm going to show you how to do this, okay? I want you to pick 2 planets that you find in your work. Seem to have a pretty regular relation. You notice that things happen when those 2 planets come together in some way. I mean, everybody has a couple favorites, right? Or a couple non-favorites. And I'll show you how to do one, and then you can play with it. Which 2 should we pick? Saturn, Mercury? Should we pick, what should we pick for right now? Saturn, Mercury, Mars, Uranus, Moon, what? You want me to do a Mars, Jupiter? Okay, yeah, that seems to be your thing. Okay, let me pick up the cap. We're going to do a Mars-Jupiter relationship. Okay, so I'm going to open up to February, for right now. Okay, I'm February 3, sorry. I know it's 2003, but I'm still back in 2002. Okay. Okay, we're on February 7th. All right, so here's how you do it. Remember what we said earlier? The slow planets always win, right? So I want you, we're picking Mars, looks like this, the warrior with the sword. And Jupiter looks like an open cup. Maybe somebody else can come up with a better thing, but it looks like a cup holding things, all right? Now, look at your sheets that you were given with the green chartreuse on them, and tell me which planet of those 2 is the fastest and which one is the slowest moving in terms of orbits, which takes longer to circle the sun and which takes less time to circle the sun. And you will see, you can know it by heart, but you will also see it in your sheet. So is Mars, which one's the fastest of these 2? Mars is the fastest, okay? Always is, always will be. So that makes Jupiter the slower of the two, right? Okay. Here's how you do it. When you figure out to see what that relationship is based on our original thing, you always take the slower planet of the two, and you always put the slower planet at this 0-degree position. You always put the slower planet up here at this position. You don't put it anyplace else. It's there, because it's easier on the eye to see it this way. Now, I want somebody, if they have an ephemeris, they probably don't, because I have the ephemeris. Okay, Jupiter today is at, in the sky, it's at 12 degrees, 29 minutes. Okay? 12 degrees, Leo, that's the main, 49 minutes. Okay, now, before we go any further, Leo, which group is that? Is that the ones that kick down the doors? Is that the fixed, that hold the fort, or is it the mutable movables? It's fixed, right? Okay, fixed is what we're working with. All right, so Jupiter today is at 12 Leo 49. You don't go anywhere else until you do the calculation for what these angles are. Really easy thing to do. If this is 1249, that means that every single one of these hard quarters is going to be 12 degrees 49, right? 12 degrees 49, 12 degrees 49, 12 degrees 49 minutes. You see that? They're all going to be, because they're equidistant, right? If we're looking at the fixed group, okay, the ones that are stubborn, all right, we've got Leo. What's the next sign after Leo that's fixed? Scorp, right? So this would be Scorpio at this position. What's the next fixed sign after Scorpio? Aquarius, right? Where we're in now. What's the last sign after Aquarius that's fixed?
Taurus.
Taurus. Very good. Okay, so far so good. Is that everybody get how we did this? Basically, you draw the same number on every angle, and you put the matching mode, the matching quality on each angle. Now, this may sound like a hard part, but really all you have to do is figure one, then you can do the rest, okay? We want to figure out, because this is what, 45-degree distance here, right? And this is another 45-degree distance here. We want to figure out what degree and sign is here. That means we have to add 45 degrees to that number. Now, some of you are going to do this and some of you aren't. Let me just do it for you, because I'm going to add, let's see, I'm going to do 30 and I'm going to do 15. So 30 is 42, which takes me to, let's see, no, I'm not going to do it that way. I'll do it the other way. 18, Leo, okay, it'll be Virgo. It'll be 18, and it'll be 45. It's going to be 37. Okay, no, that's not right. What? 27 Virgo, right? Wait, 18 and 20, that's right, 27, because this is degrees Virgo, 49 minutes. You just use the same minutes. You don't want even. Right? No. The faster planet was what? Mars? Okay, so where's Mars today? Mars today is at, oh my God, it's at 13 degrees. It's probably 12, I suspect. 12 or 13 degrees of Sag today. Okay. First of all, where would that fall in this circle?
What was the degree thing?
13 degrees, Sag. This is Scorpio. This is 27 Sag, right?
Right.
So it's going to fall in here, right? So Mars is in this is the first quarter. This is in the first quarter relationship to Jupiter right now. Well, look, is that right? Did I do that right? Yeah, that's right. Mars is in the first. This is the first quarter. This is the new moon. This is the crescent. This is the first quarter. Okay. Now that's interesting because Mars is about action and Jupiter is about opportunity. Would you consider this to be a transition? Well, let's go back. Let's check. Do you all remember your numbers for the last couple of months? Go back and check what was going on around December 21st, 22nd. Because December 21st, 22nd, Mars went right over this point, 12 Scorpio. Okay? It stays there until it gets to Sag, which is, when does it go into Capricorn? It's 4th of March. So it's that first week of March, okay? So around December 21st, 22nd is when Mars hit this angle. So there would have been some sort of a shift at that point. Does anybody remember what their numbers or anything was on the day? What's happening with the market right now?
Down the day earlier.
It's down what?
Down about 60 points to the regular portion, right?
Like in the last 24 hours?
Oh, that was through noon.
Okay. Well, you know what's interesting? The reason I said, oh my God, Mars is at 13 or 12, 12 to 13 Sag. This is really important because a minute ago, we were looking at the eclipse on December 3rd of 2002. It was a new moon. It was 12 degrees of Sag. Mars is on that eclipse point. So that's triggering something. It's stressing it, okay? That's the other way you work with the eclipses. You can actually mark your eclipses and just mark your hard transits to it through the year, and you look at those are stress days. But it'll be interesting to watch. I'll give you these dates, then you guys can play with them. Watch when Mars goes to, let's see, what degree is that, 1249? Watch when Mars goes in May. 12 degrees 49 minutes would be about May 14th and 15th. May 14th and 15th, 03, Mars is here in relation to Jupiter. It's interesting because that happens to be the eclipse that day. May 15th is the eclipse, all right? So watch May 14th, 15th, 16th. Then watch 12 Taurus. Now this is going to be, that's interesting where the retrograde's going to be. Whoa. Well, this is really interesting. Check our day here before I say anything. What did you say? Mars Jupiter is a good one this year. Let's check the retrograde is at 10. It goes to September. Wow. You just double check that. Sometimes you see these and you just stop recognizing things after a while. Okay, retrograde Mars is 29th of July, 2003. But, let's see how far does it go. Yeah, 0. So when does it hit 0? It hits June 18th, 2003. Retrograde is on July 28th. Okay. So the Mars retrograde this year is going to be in the full moon position for like 4 or 5 months, which is the rubber band getting stretched as far as it's going to stretch. Like as far, okay? And that's happening, I mean, the pre-shadow is in May, 03, June, July it goes backwards, direct September 27th, direct. So it's really here, June, July, August, September, you know, you've got about 5 or 6 months where it's in this position. So that's interesting because on June 3rd, Saturn does go into Cancer, and that starts to be that perihelion thing. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the pretty stretched. Is that what Ray is looking for, a 4-year bottom? Yeah? Be interesting to watch those dates, and then, you know, if you go through your ephemeris, you can just mark these, but this is a great way to look at the relationships between planets. I mean, if you're interested in 2 that work well for you or don't work well, then put this little grid up and you just watch these dates across these lines, looking at the ephemeris, and that'll give you some sort of transition on that day. In the middle, I don't know, but on the days that it happens, these degrees are very precise. They're very precise. And I wish there was an easy way to do this, but, you know, I would say the thing to do is just make a bunch of those templates and just fill them out for all the pairings. And just have that as your year almanac, and just watch them when they cross the lines. It takes a little work, but I think it's a good thing to have. Any questions on this? Now, I'd like you all to do this. It's your turn for the exercise, okay? You're going to team up in your pairs. You can either sit together or go. And right now it's 4:30. I don't think it should take you all more than 15 minutes to do this, do you? Do you? I don't think so. You're a bright group. So why don't we start thinking about coming back around 4:45, share the results with everybody to see them, okay? And you just have to mutually agree on which 2 planets you're going to use as this thing, okay? Communicating easily as they might at another cycle. So at that point, there's some sort of resistance, okay? Now, what I thought I would show you, and I think this is really an important drawing, and it is in your packet, and if I were you, I would take this home. If you want to learn how to measure these things out, this is probably one of the most important drawings that you'll probably ever get in terms of checking cycles. What you're seeing in front of you looks like an asterisk, right? Okay. How many parts does an asterisk have? 8, right? Okay. So if we don't even think about it, we know our basic geometry, right? We know that,
You know, if we go vertically to the straight up, that's at 0. Okay, now if we move, regardless, if we move to this line over here, what angle is this at?
that's a 90-degree angle, is it not?
Okay, and then if we continue to move through the sky and we go here, what do we have?
What's that distance? It's 180, right? And 180 is, if you drew a circle around this, this is the diameter of a circle, okay? It's what we call an opposition. And if you think about it, I call this the rubber band aspect, because in a circle, the furthest that you can go is 180 degrees, okay? You can't go any further. If you were to stretch a rubber band out, you could only go this far, and you're going to have to do one of 2 things, right? You're going to keep going, and it's going to break, right? If I had a rubber band here, I'd show you, but, you know, are you guys playful or what? You look so serious. All right. Well, let's just pretend we had a rubber band. We were being bad kids in school, okay? If we were doing this to one of the kids in the room, we'd go boom, and we'd hit them, right? Or it would break and snap on our fingers. So this is a really, really, really important geometric distance. It's 180. Now, let's keep going. If we go from here to here, kind of a trick question, actually. What's this angle? 90. But if we take the full from the top all the way over, it's what?
270.
It's 270, right? And then if we look at it just from there to there, it's 90, right? So in other words, it's closing, right? And then we continue to go back to 0. Now, this is what I call the theory of nines. I want you to think about this. And in fact, I'm going to put the right one up. I don't want to mess up on this. We're not going to do that. Let's just put this on the board. Okay, we're going to put, why don't you fellas help me and ladies help me? This is going to be what over here?
90.
90, all right. What's this going to be over here?
180.
Okay, other people can answer. It's okay. Yes, this is the hard way and this is the old-fashioned way. This is the on paper over and over and over again until you get it right. Now, there's 2 things I want to say about this little diagram thing that you all just did. First of all, whatever, you know, we always put the slow planet here. I'm going to just put Saturn as an example at the top. And I'm sure you all did that because I checked all your work and it looked like you did. Whatever degrees and signs are on these 8 points, those are very important because when the planets, it doesn't have to be the planet you work with like a Mercury or a Venus, it could be any planet, go over those degrees, signs, and minutes, there's going to be a shift because it's the beginning of a 45 degree, it's the end of a 45 degree. It's like, it's a shifting position. Does that make any sense? Okay, that's one way to use this. But the reason we did this originally was because Eric asked a very how when 2 planets are in a first quarter relationship to each other or a last quarter relationship to each other. Okay? Now, say we're talking about Saturn and Mercury. Somebody did do Saturn and Mercury in here, didn't they? Yeah. Let me. Oh, several people did. Oh, that's very interesting. Now, where did you end up putting in the full position? Where did you? Oh, you did Venus.
I'm sorry.
Venus doesn't have the hat. Venus is a mirror. Okay. Where was your Mercury? What, full moon? Was it full moon position?
Waning.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So if you, I'm not even going to put the degrees in here. I'm just going to put the planets. They found when they used Saturn up here, and they wanted to get the relationship today, February 7th, with Mercury in position. Okay? That was the relationship. Now, if somebody were to ask you, a question, or asking yourself a question. Is this Mercury building and, called waxing, like the waxing and waning moon? I think waxing is when they put more wax on the moon and they make it bigger. That's how I remember it, okay? Waning is when it's sort of dying. Yeah, or waxing it off to make it shinier. I always think of putting more wax to make it bigger. But from this position to this position is when it's growing and it's in what we call the waxing phase, or the first quarter phase here. On this side, it's waning. So let's say it was a few down the road, just for sake of example, okay? And let's say Mercury ended up here. We could say Mercury in the last quarter position to Saturn. Even though this is 90 here and this is 90 here, this is last quarter. It's dying on the vine. Over here, it's building the vine. Okay, that's one of the reasons we did this. That's how you would decipher if you're looking at the moon and the sun. If you don't have anything, just mark them down. The slower one, if you're doing the moon and the sun, which one would be up here? That's right, because it moves slower than the moon, right? And then you'd put your moon and you'd know if it was dying on the vine or if it was building. That's how you do this, okay? Now, this is the hard way. Okay? And I love to do the hard way first. Dave Grant was a great motivational speaker, and he said once, he says, if you want to choose between pleasure and pain, always choose the pain first. Then pleasure is a true reward. Okay? So here's the real deal. As soon as I find, it's right on the board. I already did it. I'll get my little. This is just another way of doing what you folks just did. Okay? This is called the graphic ephemeris. This is not declinations that we were doing earlier. I calculated this for 45 degrees because these are the 45 degrees here, the hard angles. If I had done 360, it'd be too easy and there wouldn't be much movement. But I pulled 45, and what this does is it pops everything that you were working with into a configuration. So if you look at this, for example, Mars is here, Saturn is here. This is the movement through the sky. In June, Jupiter's here. January, Jupiter's here. See how Jupiter, this literally travels with the planets through the sky. Now, these cross points that you're seeing here, see these cross points? All the different cross points? Those are when these kinds of angular cycles are taking place. In other words, this one actually shows like the little semi-square 45. This is this 90 degree. This is the 0. I mean, this one actually shows it. So if you see a pile up somewhere, let's try to find a pile up here. Here's a good little pile up right here. This is around 3rd, 4th week of January. What was going on around the middle to the 3rd week of January? Activity, by the way, this is not all the planets. This is not Mercury. I didn't put that in here. I didn't put Mars. I didn't put Venus. Because if you start, this is just the outer planets. I do have, in fact, you have this in your workbook that I gave you. You can run this for Mercury, Saturn. You can run it for Mars. You can run it for the Sun. I didn't do that because it gets really cluttered. But these are kind of good to watch because here's something coming together around the 3rd week of May. And I'm sure if we had Mercury planets running through here and the moon running through here, we would be seeing a lot of activity here. I just didn't superimpose them because I just didn't want you folks to go too crazy with all the details. This is Mars movement. Look at this, how it goes like this, up and down. That's the retrograde. Isn't that interesting? And Mercury's not on this one. Let's see another one that would be it's pretty marketable. Yeah, well, you can't see it completely, but see how Jupiter's here? And see, this is about 3rd of April. See, it's turning. That's when Jupiter goes direct. If you would, in other words, this is, and where they cross, where you have major crosses, like look at this, 1st or 2nd week of August. This is pretty big. And really, there'd be a lot more cross points if we used the faster planets. But this is what you were all doing just now, except it's called a graphic ephemeris. And I actually have this sheet in your book, and you can run these on most of the software programs. So this is from Solar Fire. I know WinStar has it. I'm sure that Genie's has a green graphic ephemeris, does it not? Yeah. And what you may want to do, which I'm sorry I didn't do it, is make a separate one for this exact time period with Mercury, that's not on here, Moon, Sun, and then just lay them on top of each other, because then you'll see a lot more intersecting points at certain points. You were going to ask a question, Frank.
I just want to mention something. I was told once if you have 3 Astro events on the same day,
Yes.
that's big news, eh?
That's the 2 out of 3 rule.
Yeah.
That's my 2 out of 3 rule. If 2 or 3 things are happening at the same time, then it's pretty much...
So you've got 2. You got one at the end of March and you got one in August, right?
Yeah, we got right here. We got a lot.
Yeah.
Right here.
So you got the one.
We got
maybe-
this here,
Yeah.
going here when Jupiter goes direct. This one's interesting.
Yeah.
Right here. Here, here. There's probably a lot more with the faster planets, but I didn't want to confuse you. Yes, Eric.
Forgive my ignorance here, but
It's-
now, with doing the chart this way, we could tell whether it was waning or waxing.
Yeah, you can't do it with this one. You can do waxing and waning with the template that I gave you. This is just to see the cross points, okay? But I did that because it was going to answer both questions. Yes.
How would we, how do we know which
How-
aspect is that?
Say that a little louder.
How do we know what the aspect is? Is it a square, is it a trine?
Oh, good question. Good question.
45 degrees or 90 degrees?
Okay, how do we know which aspect it is? Well, it's, yes, this is what we call a 45 degree. If it says at the top 90, 45, 22, these are the hard angles. It doesn't matter, they're literally piled on top of each other, okay? You won't see any nice angles here. You won't see trines in this, because trines are 120. You won't see any sextiles. Those are 60, half of 120. You won't see that. And I don't use those because to me, they're nice. You know? But they don't show any action. You know, they don't show any motivation either, and they don't show any stress. This shows stress.
There's one of those hard aspects,
It's one of the hard angles.
45 or 90 or...
Or 135 or any of those. And to continue with the answer to your question, this program, I did this purposely because I figured you'd want to see this. I actually asked for them to put the symbols for the like this one you can hardly see. It's a square with a little foot on it. Looks like a square foot thing. That's 135 degrees. That's here. Okay? This little half, see how that is? That's called a semi-square. Semi-square is half of a 90, 45, 45. This is obviously in opposition. That's 180. Let's see what else we have here. I can hardly see. Well, we've pretty much covered all of them. There's a square right there. Here, or here, here, or here. I don't have to put those on there. I just know when puppies go, and there's a whole bunch of them, there's going to be some action on that day. And really, in order to get a thing, I think you really want to use the Moon, the Mars, the Saturn stuff too, because those are moving quicker. But I just didn't want to confuse you putting too many things on the wheel. It's always good to have 2 overlays, you know, and then you can put a dot. And so basically, I'm going to mark this up. This is a really, obviously, this is a big meeting point. Let's see, this is in here a meeting point. Let's see, we've got something over here. There's a lot of activity over here, and if you look at where the dots are, if you look at the dates, then you just go vertically here. And actually, like I said on the program, you can punch that and it'll give you the date. But you know that this probably, there's 4 weeks roughly. This is somewhere around the first 7, maybe 8 days, right? You know, you can pop the eclipses in there. You can pop all kinds of things in there. You know, if you're doing, this is just an idea. If you're doing intraday trading, you could do Moon-Mercury cycles. Just do the Moon-Mercury and see when they're connecting. Yes?
So take Mars.
Mars?
Okay, you had,
This is Mars.
yeah, but...
Mars first.
Okay, it's Mars first.
And this is, because it's like, think about it, it's going around.
So in other words, when you get the aspect, do you go over horizontally to the planet or no?
Actually, this is a good question, what you're saying. This is literally what we call the radix to radix. In other words, the planets moving at the current now. It's a good question because you can put a natal chart here, like a company. I do this with companies, if you have the right data. And the natal chart, yeah, I didn't do it because I didn't want to confuse you. The natal chart will have all the planets from the natal chart here, and they'll be horizontal. In fact, there is a natal chart on here, but what I did is I erased it. That's what I did. See these shadow lines here?
Yeah.
See this?
Also, that would...
That's the radix. That's the chart of the person or the company or whatever.
You're going over to something like
Yeah, see this, where you have all these horizontal lines? Isn't that interesting? And so you can pinpoint, like I'm working on a project for Lucent right now, not for Lucent, for somebody who wants to do something with Lucent. And I'm not sure yet. But anyway, I would watch something like this with the company's chart, because this would tell me, gee, there's a lot of hits on the chart, plus in the sky there's a lot of hits. But for purposes of today, don't think of this as anything but coming together cycles that are moving through the sky. Okay? Yes, Deborah.
Could we take this information and use it on a level that would be practical life? We know that when 9/11 happened,
Oh, yeah.
it had an effect in the market. So could we take the date of, say, 9/12 and start with what the aspects were on that day and see where we are? But that's just a year cycle.
It's just a year, yeah.
I mean, I would like to find out, where are we in this evolution of building, waning, et cetera, with this particular situation?
Like in terms of a longer period of time.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't bring those with me, but that's the stuff I was using for my traders in Caesar's Palace. But I had like 3 or 4 big notebooks of stuff, and I had literally, 100 year of the outer planets, and it was fascinating to watch when depressions came and recessions came to see the hits they were hitting right when these things all came together. But I didn't do that because I wanted to keep this really simple. I mean, I went way past what I should have done today, but I thought you all would be able to use it a little bit better. So, okay, so yes.
In matrix or solar fire, the waning side, we talked about it earlier, 180 to 360,
Yeah.
visually in an aspectarian grid.
Yeah. The question is, how do you see one of the softwares, the waning or the waxing in an aspectarian grid? You really have to know your astrology. Yeah, that's the wrong answer. But that's why I have you doing the template. Because if you, really, this is just like multiplication tables. You do enough of these templates. Say you do a whole year's worth, which I was mentioning, or if maybe you have 2 favorites you work with. You'll know after a while, okay, this is behind, this is in front. The way to always look at the slower planet and then look at literally, where does that fall in the sequence of the zodiac, okay? Is the other planet in the signs before or the other planet in the signs after? If it's in the signs after, then it's building, it's a waxing, okay? But if it's in the sign before, then it's waning, usually, depending. So, but, I don't know how to tell you that. They have in the aspectarian grids, they have separation and approaching, but that's not the same as waxing and waning. I will tell you, in the Business Astrology 101 book, I really do explain this cycle very thoroughly and how to do that. And we actually kind of do this exercise for a person's career cycle. And it's actually much more detailed because what I do with that is I talk about the different phases of the moon and what those really mean. So that's another reason to, use it as like a little program thing. Okay. You all did really well today. I know some of you are confused. I know. The thing I always tell students is don't try to understand all of it. Just take one thing today that you liked and that you understood and work with that. And just keep working with it and working it. If you like the declinations idea, work with that. If you like the retrograde, and let's just do this. This is a good thing for students to do. We can just sort of recoup it a little bit. Lots of times when you do, this is a class that should take like a year or 2 or 3 or 4, okay, to really get it. But the one thing I want you to know is, if you think about when you showed up here today at 1:17 p.m. when we started, and now, you didn't know what this meant, okay? You didn't know what well, some of you did. I'm not assuming that you didn't. Pre-shadow, retrograde, direct, and shadow. Waxing and waning. The meanings of, actually not the meanings of the planets as much as their orbits. Slower versus faster. These are all things y'all learned today. You didn't know probably much about declinations, plus 23.5, minus 23.5, and the eclipse cycles of 18.6 years in the north and the south node. So you actually learned some real basics today, real basic tools. If you can just pick one thing from today and just work it, that might just help you understand the rest much more easily. Don't try to ever attack any of this like full bore. Take what means something to you, okay? I think, oh, and then we did a graphic ephemeris today, too. We did the declinations and the graphic ephemeris, which, you know, are great. I mean, I would say if you do have some sort of software that does run the graphic ephemerises, I gave you a sample in your packet for what's on the board, but go in and do Mercury, Moon, Saturn, do a graphic ephemeris, and just start following that with your trading, and make sure you calculate it out at 45 degrees modulus, okay? And if you really want to get really wild and crazy, try 22 and a half. It says, in Solar Fire it says modulus, but it's just basically 45 degrees, 90 degrees, or 22 and a half degrees. Okay? So with that, I appreciate you all being here. Have a great weekend. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to be one of the students tomorrow.